Hello, Mr. Marzio. Hey, April.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hello, Danielle.
Hi, good evening. I'm just getting in from work. So give me just a couple minutes to get
Oh,
started.
no worry. People are still joining. You're totally on time.
Thank you.
Hi, Ben. Hey, Dan.
Hello. Good evening.
Good evening.
Just wait a couple more minutes for see Scott and Mariah and anyone else we're missing. No. Hi, Mariah.
Hi.
Kirsten, Scott's having a hard time getting in. He said he doesn't have a board invite.
Let me go in and resend that.
Okay, I'll let him know.
Thanks. All right, just resent. Great. Hey, Scott. Sorry you haven't had a glitch there getting in. I'm not sure why. I had to resend Mr. Marzio's earlier today too. So technology, what are you going to do? So thanks everyone for waiting for a few moments. Welcome to the January 19th, 2022 Board of Directors meeting. Looks like we have about 12 attendees. Thank you for attending and also being here. Board meetings are for the board, but we're very excited to have you here and being so participatory in all of our business. And please always feel free to email the board with any questions that you might have or any other thoughts. So I'll go ahead and open the meeting with the opening verse. And at the end of the meeting, if Dan, if you wouldn't mind reading the closing verse, I actually remembered rather than just bringing it on someone, so you can be prepared to read our closing verse for us. Thank you. The true aim of education is to awaken real powers of perception and judgment in relation to life and living, for only such an awakening can lead to true freedom. Rudolf Steiner. All right, and we'll do board member introductions. I'll kick it off. My name is Kirsten Kabina. I am the board president. I have 2 children at Desert Marigold. And then next on my screen is Nellie, so if you wouldn't mind.
Nellie Grossenbacher, board member with 4 children at Desert Marigold.
Great. Dan?
Dan Franks, board treasurer. I had 2 children at Desert Marigold and will be returning with 3 in a year or 2.
Great. Mariah?
Mariah Moon, board member with 1 and hopefully 2 children at DMS.
Scott?
Hi, Scott Edwards, board member, 1 child in 1st grade.
Great. April?
April Sauer, board secretary, and I have a daughter at DMS.
Ben?
Hello, Ben Fong. I'm a board member and I have 2 kids at DMS.
Mr. Tanner?
John Tanner, board member.
Thank you. And Danielle?
Hi, good evening. Danielle Martinez, board member. My daughter is in 10th grade and we've been at DMS since preschool.
Great. All right. And then we've also been joined by our executive director. Frank, go ahead.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Frank Maurizio, the proud director at Desert Marigold.
Thank you. And Michelle Krasner.
Hi, thank you. I'm Michelle Kratzer and parent council chair, and I have 3 kids at DMS.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so we'll just walk down the agenda that everyone received. And Frank, will start with the executive director report. I've allotted 10 minutes. You might have noticed that I'm trying to put time brackets around things as long as I think they will take, so we can try to keep a relatively short or not excessively long meetings. So those are approximations. I'm not, that great with estimating time. So you've got about 10 minutes.
Okay. Since the last time we met, 2 weeks, a lot has happened, but I will start with the best news of the day. Today, we had 0 reports of a new COVID case. That's the first time in 2 weeks. We have had 35 students test positive in the last 2 weeks, and 5 staff members test positive in the last 2 weeks. And so, as you can tell, I have become the COVID king in the last 2 weeks. It takes up most of my day, whether it's parent questions or phone calls or contact tracing, or talking with Deb about getting stuff over to the health department. It's a bit much. We're all a little worn out from it, including board members and parents and teachers and kids. I don't want to leave the kids out. So that's why today was good. No reports of any new cases. We're going to shoot for 2 days in a row tomorrow and build on it from there, because I'm going to keep thinking positive about this. We're moving forward. We're holding school. Our classes are open, and that's a good thing. Another positive note, we met Monday night. The contemplation team met for a quick hour Barb Cunningham hosted it for us, and Joan and Peter were there as well. And something that came from the contemplation, as we kind of did a touch-in about how are things going, what's going on since the last time we met back in late August. And one of the things that came from it is a team of a parent, a community member, and a staff member would like to do a Zoom with any board member that wants to ask questions, get feedback, just because they didn't get to see a lot of board members. Of course, John and Danielle were part of the contemplation and did a wonderful job representing you. But since then, we have several new members of the board too. And I don't want to leave Mariah out. She was there, even though she wasn't a board member then. The new members could have an opportunity to talk to some people on the contemplation. I think it's a really nice idea. And with your blessings later on, I will take the liberty of setting up those Zooms for people who wish to participate in that. It's not something you have to do. They're just thinking of it as a good idea to communicate with all board members, and of course, new board members who came on after the contemplation and may not know much about it. So that was a good thing from this week as well. A third positive thing is I finally heard back from the company building the wood shop, and our frame should be delivered in the next 2 weeks so that we can start, so that we can start erecting it and then taking the next step to contract for electrical, air conditioning, and fire alarms. So that project is moving forward. A little bit of setback on the bathroom at the high school, as we are just waiting on the mercy of the city of Phoenix to approve our permits. As you know, that takes time, and they keep me posted every week on where we are with that. So hopefully by the next board meeting, I will be able to give you information that the bathroom is starting, that they're breaking ground. We are at student enrollment at 285 today, but I believe we have 1 or 2 starting next Monday, so it should bring us to 287 next week. As you know, I think it's Wednesday, is the 100th day. And so we're trying to get as many people registered before the 100th day so we actually get school funding for them for the rest of the year. So it'd be nice to be at 287, which was our budgeted number before the 100th day. I think that's it. That's all my announcements for right now, unless you have questions.
I have a question.
Yes.
Thanks for all your work, Frank, and pushing through, especially with the wood shop. That's awesome that it's 2 weeks out. Out of the 35 children that have had COVID over the past 2 weeks, how many kids were considered close contact that were sent home as well? Were there, because I know that there were some days where we had high absences. Were there a lot of close contacts that were not in school?
Well, remember we had the all EC out as a close contact. So that was 40 some kids. That was very high. Then we had 4th grade with 12. That was very high. Some other grades, though, have been 1 or 2, but those were the 2 big numbers of those grades. I couldn't give you the exact count because depending on when it happened, like some kids only had to quarantine for 2 days because it was attached to the 3-day weekend, which helped because those 3 days counted towards the 5 days. So I don't want to say all of those kids were out 5 school days. That's not necessarily true, depending on the point of contact, the day of contact, a 3-day weekend. It just varies. It all depends on a timeline. But that EC closing was a big one because it's 3 classes. That was huge.
What was the highest day that we had absence? How many kids were there?
I think on one day we had 98 out.
Thank you.
I couldn't quote you every day, Nellie. I know whenever there's a bump, Bonnie makes sure she tells me, hey, this is how many are out today. And that was considered a bump, of course.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for Frank?
I'm just curious if you know, what was the highest absentee or isolation or sent home of faculty of any given period, do you know?
Well, they all didn't have it at the same time, and some of them had it over holiday break. And then when they came back, they had to quarantine because they weren't allowed to test for 5 days after that. And it just so coincided with like January 2nd type of thing. But 5 over the last 2.5 weeks. And they were different time frames because remember, the quarantine is typically 5 days, and many of our staff, well, almost all our staff wear masks, and many of our staff are vaccinated or had it a second time. So they were able to use that new CDC guideline that says if you have an immunity from having it once, you can come back under a quarantine, under a mask situation with no symptoms.
Thank you.
Frank, are we doing anything special for the 100th day? Or is that kind of hard to do this year given the current?
Many of our parents are very cautious. They call in and say, my kid has a sore throat, so I'm going to keep him home to play it safe. And certainly we appreciate that because we don't know on one day if they have something or not. And so many of them are just cautious about wanting to not be part of the spread, so they keep them home. So I certainly don't want to send a message of forget all of that and come to school. That just would not be a smart thing to do. I certainly will send an email next Monday reminding everyone, hey, Wednesday's the 100th day. If everyone's feeling good, we'd love you to be here, as that counts greatly towards our budget, and the state pays us on that day for kids coming. So I'll send something not very strongly worded as to not twist arms, but just as a reminder. That's all.
Great. Thank you. All right. Well, if there's no other questions for Mr. Marizio, we'll move on to Michelle, the Parent Council.
Thank you. So right into that 100th day, we were originally going to have the barbecue on that day, but we are rescheduling it, most likely similar to last year where we did it right after spring break. We'll reassess the numbers probably in February and see where we'll be at. Same thing with our s'mores and community workday. Those are going to be rescheduled to when it's safe. Hopefully, we're looking at February or March. Our book club is on Thursday nights. It's not going to be this Thursday, but next Thursday we will have it at 8 p.m. And the only other thing is it's not parent council, but we kind of help with it, I guess. The Duck Dock /Island. We have all the materials we're signed up for, and we have the majority of them. There's just a few that we are waiting on, and Hector is looking at the plans and making sure the material is good and all that kind of stuff, and we should be good to go. He's excited to actually to build it, so I think he might be doing it on his own. I don't know. He's like really excited about it. So that is exciting to me also. So
Fantastic. Does anyone have any questions for Michelle?
awesome.
Thank you so much, Michelle. We really appreciate the updates and all the good works you guys do.
And our next meeting will be in person in the morning in February. Sorry, I don't have the date right in front of me. But
I usually send out a parent square, right? So
yeah,
great.
it'll
Look
be
forward
the
to receiving it.
second Tuesday.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. On to financial and budgetary information. So we all received the financial pack. I'll just share my screen so we can all look at it together. We all received this from Monique earlier in the week. This is a report that she put together. I like this one because it kind of shows us how we're trending against budget. So nothing that jumped out at me, anything that I followed up with. I didn't know if anybody else had any thoughts or discussions on the P&L or budget. All right, move on to the balance sheet. And no big huge changes here. Oh, Danielle, did you have a question?
Just a brief. The screen you were just sharing, is that also shared with us? I didn't see that in her list of documents.
Yep, it was in her email, and April dropped it into the
Okay,
board.
I saw the other ones. I didn't see this one. Thank you. I'll look again.
Yeah. I really like this one. It just kind of shows me how we're kind of trending. Great. And of course, the balance sheet we've got here, no big changes as far as our assets. Or as I scroll down here, I didn't see the collapsed ones. So sorry, I've got the big one here, liabilities and equities. And as far as the refinance goes, I've been pretty attached to Desert Financial at the hip these last few weeks, as we are in underwriting with them right now, which basically means they're reviewing all of our financial statements over the last few years, asking lots of questions around, numbers that are high or low in their opinion, just to understand our financial position. We've had some financial challenges in the past, so we're working through all of those things. We currently have 3 loans, and we're trying to consolidate 2 of those into refinance with Desert Financial, which will be hopefully a very favorable rate for us, and also give us some automation as far as being able to auto pay loans, which we're not able to do right now. So our accountants are cutting checks to both of our lenders. So hopefully we'll get a little bit more automation out of that as well. Just a little bit more visibility and just having a bigger financial institute handle that for us. So that's going along well. I have my fingers crossed. I think I've met with them for the last time yesterday evening and gotten them their last few pieces of information. So I'm hoping to hear back some good news to report later in the week or maybe early next week. And we should have that hopefully put to bed. And that's all I had for that update, unless anyone had any questions or comments.
A couple of questions, please. I had asked for the amortization schedule for the 3 existing loans. Can you go ahead and send that out, please? Or is that accessible somewhere?
I'm not sure that I'm not sure who all has access to that folder. And one of those loans is from a lender who wants to remain anonymous. So it's as few as possible. But let me see if you have access to that.
And if not, it can just be the schedule terms, remaining term, current interest payment breakdown. Doesn't have to be anything more specific than that. And when has there been a proposal from Desert Financial at all?
There
that
has
we can
been.
review? Okay, was that?
No, nothing that we can review.
Okay,
No,
and
we're
why
just,
not?
because it was sent to Gregory and it's, I believe it's confidential. So I'd have to check and see how much of it we can share.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions or thoughts? No? Okay. Moving right along. Okay, so we have next on our list here the approval of the minutes from the previous meeting. So I move that we approve the minutes from the previous meeting. Is there any discussion?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So I just want the board to know that I will not be approving the minutes because they're inaccurate. And through no fault of April's, I was not able to correct them in time, the 3-day time limit that I was given. So she's going by procedure and policy. But nonetheless, they are inaccurate. I made several comments during the motion that eventually passed dealing with the closures of school and grades. There seemed to be some confusion during the discussion meeting 2 weeks ago about when and how and why to contact Maricopa Department of Public Health. As it reads, the motion says that we will be in contact with them to define the various changing definitions of what an outbreak is. The outbreak in the discussion, I said it probably on 3 separate occasions that unfortunately didn't make the meeting. Outbreak was never intended to be a trigger for closure. Rather, it was merely a nidus to begin a discussion or a consideration of it in the background of other things being considered. For example, what's happening in the community, especially what's happening in the community. What are the hospitalization rates? What's the death rate? What are the ventilator uses? What kind of variant are we dealing with? How virulent is it? What's the vaccination rate amongst the community? What is our school like? How much ventilation do we have? How compliant have we been with our own protocols? All these things play into it. That was said a couple times. That didn't make it. And that's not my spin on it. That's what the CDC recommended back in December, taken right from their website. So unfortunately, that's not how this played out. And my motion was never intended to surrender an opinion of an epidemiologist to take control over executive decision of Frank to shut down certain things. So I will not be approving the minutes because I think it's very important for those comments to have made it to show that there was a discussion about that. And I don't think it's right to approve inaccurate minutes.
So I'm just trying to understand. So you're saying the discussion is inaccurate or the motion was inaccurate or that we're reporting doing disease reporting to the Maricopa County is inaccurate or all of the above?
Well, the motion was correct, word by word. The spirit of the motion, the discussion around it, how we were going to implement it was not included at all on several occasions. And so that's what I was wanting to correct. I wasn't able to correct. And so by default, the minutes are not accurate.
Okay. And April, correct me if I'm wrong, there's 3 days that we have to correct minutes.
Open meeting law gives us 3 business days from the date of our meeting. So our meeting is on Wednesday. I have until Monday. I need to post them on Monday.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I should never had this come up before. I'm sorry.
It's a victim of procedure and policy, and I just want to explain why I'm going to be not voting to support the minutes.
Understood. Thank you for bringing that up. And I guess that was a really long meeting. There's a lot of notes, so I'm sure it's lots and lots of hours and hours of discussion too. So sorry that those didn't get recorded in the way that in the spirit that you meant them, or then the ways the discussion went. We still need to move to approve the minutes, so we'll still go ahead. And are there any other discussions? No? Okay. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
All right. All those in favor? All those opposed? All right. Danielle, did you vote? I didn't see.
I was waiting for the abstain.
Okay. And all those abstaining? Sorry. Thank you.
It's okay.
All right. Motion passes. April, did you have a chance to capture the vote?
Yes, I got that. I got the votes. Thank you.
Okay, great. Our second item is some operational items. And first would be the email that April sent around charter representatives. Gregory is still our current charter representative. There's a lot of paperwork to fill out. April, I think you said we needed to vote on the charter representative so that we can get that in our board minutes. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm still trying to finish.
Nope, go ahead.
This motion, and I just lost who seconded that. I realized I didn't write that.
Ryan,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
I'll let you get caught up.
One second. Sorry, this is the trouble of being the keeper of the minutes, but then I also I have assignments I need to do. Okay, yeah, so one of the things that I sent out, I'm sorry if I'm repeating you, Kirsten, I was typing and listening at the same time.
Yep.
Regarding the training that we've been talking about to get from the charter, I've learned that this particular training that I've been talking about that's happening in February is specific for charter representatives. So right now I'm a charter representative. Gregory was obviously the charter representative. He is no longer with us. So we need to elect Kirsten as our charter representative as she's our board president. So that will get us into the training that's coming up. And then what I've been told by the charter board is that once that training is done, they expect to do it again. I'm assuming it's going to be the exact same thing. I don't know why they would change it because we all need the same training. And they did say that since it will be open to everyone, that should be in the newsletter. So if we all just keep our eyes on that, that'll be helpful. So at this time, I move to elect Kirsten Kubina as a charter representative for the VSWEA with the Arizona State Board of Charter Schools.
Second.
All those in favor? Sorry, April. All right, opposed? Abstaining?
I did miss the approve. Excuse me.
Okay,
Okay, can I catch that? Who's abstaining?
McNally and Scott.
Thank you.
All right, and then as part of our compliance, we have all that fun new board member paperwork. I think there's still a couple of items out. It's been hard to get those fingerprint clearance cards, I know, but as soon as you get those, please send in copies of them so we can go ahead and file the paperwork to get you added officially to the board. And also we'll be officially removing Gregory, not because he's not fantastic, but that he's stepped down from the position. And then also just wanted to update everyone, if you hadn't seen already, we talked about this a few meetings ago, but Dan was able to set up an autoresponder on the board email address so that as soon as an email comes in, if we can't get to it right away, since I know we all have so many other things to go on, that they at least know their email was received and that's up and running. And so if you haven't seen it, that's something that Dan was able to do with Deb. Thank you, Dan. And any discussion on any of those items?
Yes, please. For the charter representatives, are we able to have a buddy system so that we can mentor when we do have these transitions, and we do that side by side when whatever the documents that need to be prepared, reviewed, finalized, signed, or recorded? Is there a central file? Is it all online? Attending meetings or being again DMS representatives. It would be nice if we had that in place.
Yeah, I agree.
Are there always just two, or can there be more? And is it necessarily someone with an officer title, or is that just a nice way to go about it?
That might be a question for John Tanner, as he's been on the board for a long time, but I've only ever seen it be officers, and I've only ever seen two. But I can't tell you if that's like the end all be all of decisions, but maybe John Tanner has something to say about.
No, I really don't have a lot to say on that, but thank you for asking.
April, do we have a contact there, or should we just kind of send like maybe a generic question to an info email? Do you think?
Well, we have our, oh my gosh, you guys, I'm tired and my brain is gone. Our person, the person who's assigned to us from the charter, Mary, she's on like every listing that we have. I'm going to get her last name wrong. Starts with a Q, Mary Q something. So we could certainly email her. But I figure, I've already signed up for the training. It's in early February. I'm happy to just add that to my list of questions at that point. If we want it earlier, I'm happy to send an email.
And similar to like the president playbook of what those representatives actually do and how we can be helpful and resourceful and stay on top of that.
Is it Mary Krawanta, by the way?
I've never had to pronounce it, but that sounds accurate to me.
We'll try to get some answers. And yes, Danielle, we are trying to keep the playbook updated as we come across little nuancy things here and there. And I believe April's also started a secretary playbook of sorts, so that, we can start getting all this out and the next person doesn't kind of start all over again. So we're hopefully doing a good job documenting all that information. And with this in particular, Gregory did a great job in linking out to the forms that we need to fill out, how to go about all that. So I think there's just a few more things we need to add to fill it out. Okay. Next up are grants, and I will turn it over to Ben and Mariah.
Mariah, do you want to take this? Or do you want me to just say a few words?
Yeah, if you want to say, and I'll chime in. I have a sick child next to me, so I'll let you start.
Sure. I will be quick. The short of it is that Mariah and I have begun to put together a grants list with the hope of that turning into an actual grants calendar, so that we can get some sense of like what deadlines are ahead of us and what kinds of things that we would be eligible for, what kind of things that we should be that would be probable for us to get, and thus the things that we should prioritize in terms of grants. There's a lot of local foundations with a lot of money, especially after how the market's done recently. And the hope is that we can begin to build the relationships at these different places, bring people to DMS, show them the school, and begin to start the process of getting into the grant world, with the hope of maybe one day passing on this work to a development director. I'm trying to think. I will be, I guess Mariah and I will be reaching out about different information to also get together a general grant language kind of doc. I mean, so many of the grants require such similar things in terms of like information and descriptions and whatnot. So we'll just put together like a general document of that kind of stuff so that it's on hand, and begin applying to some things. I think it's a definite need of the school. We've got a few different programs that we're hoping to get some money for. So hopefully this spring we can begin to bring some of that in.
That's fantastic.
I'll just chime in. Yeah, the list that we're producing is what I use internally for my agency, with the hope that, I think a lot of these are relationship driven. So getting engaged with the board, with Frank, having people out like been suggested, but again, having that language and everything kind of calendared in a calendar, and specific to whether it's animal care, whether it's education, whether it's curriculum. I feel like we will have a comprehensive list of opportunities for community grant funders.
And I have a sample grant proposal that Desert Vista High School shared with me. I'll go ahead and forward that over to you.
Yeah, that would be great. Thanks, Danielle.
Fantastic. I appreciate you guys taking this on. It's a big need and a lot of work, so I appreciate you all the extra time. Okay, and then Ben, I'll just pass it back to you with our agendized motions. I felt like it was a fantastic idea, so I wanted to bring it up to the board as well.
Oh, sure. No, I mean, this, I think that this serves two purposes. So the basic idea is just that, especially when we're dealing with specific documents like our COVID policy, that we agendize specific motions so that everyone knows ahead of time what kind of language is being proposed for which section of the document and whatnot. This could go sort of more generally for any of the motions that the board brings up for discussion. And I think, one, it's beneficial because it allows us to be much more efficient with our time. If we know what the language is ahead of time, we know what we're seeing. We don't need to formulate it on the spot, and so it's going to be more accurate, but also it gives everyone time to sort of process what is going to go into a new document. And the second thing is I think it increases transparency with the public as well. Oftentimes with shorter agenda descriptions, it can be kind of gnomic for most people coming to a meeting. They can see the agenda item, but not necessarily know specifically what's going to be discussed. So the hope is that agendizing specific motion language in the agenda itself will help us increase transparency with the public as well.
I'd like to add that when I was conducting the one meeting I ran, I knew I wouldn't be able to concentrate on that. So I did ask certain board members, could you go ahead and propose this? And it worked very nicely. And so that is a great idea.
Great. Yeah, I thought so too. I loved the transparency piece of it, especially after our COVID, our COVID marathon policy meeting, just, making sure that we, have the language down and are just really clear. And then we have time to kind of consider the motion and what we might want to change rather than on the spot. And I'm not proposing that we don't have the ability to call motions on the spot. We will always have that capability too. But I think this is a nice way to maybe just keep things a little cleaner. Did anybody else have any thoughts on it?
I think it's a great idea.
Okay. Well, then I'll go ahead and make a motion to move that whenever applicable or possible, that we put our motions on an agenda item that will be, on our agenda that's posted 24 hours in advance for transparency and clarity purposes. Did you get all that, April? Was it too wordy? Feel free to wordsmith that down.
Kristen, can I chime in real quick?
Yes, please. I'm
not sure per bylaws how, we're taxing ourselves of now conforming to what we're saying within the agenda. And I'm not sure how much looseness we would have then to vote or make a motion outside of what we are suggesting within an agenda item, if that makes sense.
You mean changing the language?
Well, I think you said we would try or it was a kind of open-ended, but I feel like if it's in the board agenda, I've had board agenda items where you can't vote on anything outside of what is being already that is posted in the agenda in advance, if that makes sense. I'm not sure, Ben, if you have any thoughts.
No, I've been in very similar situations where only agendized motions you're allowed to vote on, which prohibits people from bringing up motions in a meeting. And I don't think that's necessarily what we want to do. I think we want to leave that option open to formulate motions in the meeting. But I mean, I think this could just be maybe an expectation of board members that, like, especially if we know that we want to bring up specific things to come up for a vote that upcoming meeting, that, the specifics of the proposal just be there ahead of time so that everyone else can think about it and process and whatnot. But I think it would probably be a little bit restrictive to say that's the only way we can do it. So, I think I agree with Mariah that I'm not sure we necessarily need to vote on it because that would bind us to maybe something that we don't want to do. But that was my thinking.
More of a suggestion.
Best practices.
Best practices. Thank you, Dan. How does everyone feel about that? Does that sound good enough?
And if it couldn't, or if we didn't make it in time for the agenda, would email that we didn't respond to, just like these are proposed, or especially for April's taking notes.
Natalie, did you have any thoughts on it? You've been quiet.
No, my only concern is that then we're just making sure there's flexibility. I don't want to be held to, we're only said we're going to make 3 motions on this one situation, or, I'm thinking obviously of our meeting last time where we just had a lot of motions going on. And I just want to make sure that it allows for flexibility and we're not locking in to language that we can't move around.
I think, and I totally agree, Nellie. I think a way to do that, if we do want to have a little bit more guidance outside of just notation of what we're wanting to work on, is each agenda item then would be an action item or a educational item. But if it's an action item, that means we could do whatever we want within, like we did, last time. But if it's restrictive, we're voting of only things that are that we're writing out, then we could be binded towards not having wiggle room.
Okay, so we'll leave it as a best practice with, if you can get that in, and we'll vote on the motion at the meeting, and we'll also leave it open for discussion. If it gets denied and we need to reword it, we'll still have that flexibility. Does that sound more in line with, what we're hoping to achieve here, while still having, the ability for transparency and writing the motion in advance, so that poor April's fingers don't have to translate every single thing we say.
Yeah, just quickly to reiterate, this isn't about restricting anything that happens in the meeting. It's just about transparency as much as possible by agendizing motions, and also being most efficient with our own time as well. I think that sometimes it can be difficult to know what one's objections to a motion are without seeing that language. Sometimes it's substantive, sometimes it's just a matter of wordsmithing. And I think having that language ahead of time can oftentimes just help move things along quicker. But by no means is it meant to restrict motions being brought up in the meeting.
Any other thoughts? I think it's a great idea. Okay, great. So going forward, if there's something in particular you want to just send over as you normally would any kind of agenda items, and we'll just put it on the agenda, and we'll see if it works well for us, great. And if it's something that we want to make adjustments to, we can always do that too. We'll just keep it kind of something that we're trying. All right. And on to the COVID policy. I left us 30 minutes just as an approximation. I had Frank and Deb put together kind of a starting point from the 2022 COVID policy and procedures that I sent out this afternoon. Sorry, it took a little bit longer to get that out to everyone. I thought we'd start with them because they're the ones administering it. We already voted in the CDC isolation and quarantine policy last time, and a couple of other motions. So that was to be woven in here as well. And then at least we would have a document to start on. Obviously this doesn't need to be the final document, but thought at least it would give us a jumping off point. So I know it went out later in the afternoon. Not sure if everybody had the chance to read this with, I know it's 4 pages, read it with everything, and give it the appropriate time they need. So we certainly don't need to make any decisions on it tonight, but wanted to at least open up the discussion, see what direction we wanted to go. If there was any feedback or thoughts, I'll just open the floor.
I skimmed the document very quickly. Is there mention specifically of closures of schools, grades, classes, or outbreaks specifically in that document, or was that not included?
I was very busy at work today too, so I didn't have a chance to fully go through it in all transparency. Frank, did you want to jump in?
I don't believe that was in the document we sent you. Was based on the first document you guys approved, which was a much shorter version. But as you remember, the last 2 weeks, lots of parents, including yourselves, had questions of, I don't understand. Am I doing this? Am I doing that? It was confusing because it didn't have enough detail behind the rule, if you will. So we expanded on that document, and I believe, Scott, that the other motion that you had talked about was about closures, not closure, the wrong word, outbreak. That was a different piece of paper, and we didn't touch that paper. We looked at that short CDC one of, if you are vaccinated, if you have COVID, you do these things. If you are close contact, you do these things. And then that new one, the third one, if you had COVID already and you have a natural immunity, this applies. And believe it or not, that was not clear enough to most people. And I understood why when they asked specific questions. So you will see explanations inside of those, because if you remember, there was a topic and then there were like 3 or 4 bullets, and then there was a topic and 3 or 4 bullets. And so we just expanded on that because it wasn't clear. I'll give you one specific. The person with immunity who might have had COVID. We discussed that you just had to show, prove, ascertain that, yes, I tested positive in the last 90 days. But we did not go into any detail of how you do that. Because one of the problems we discovered was, let's say my daughter, Hannah Maurizio, had COVID 30 days ago, and I just went to CVS and bought an over-the-counter test. That will not have Hannah Maurizio's name on it, nor will it have a date stamp that, according to the guidelines, you have to prove who took the test and was it inside 90 days? And so how do we follow that without having those details written for people? And that was the questions we were getting is, well, I didn't go to a doctor. I just went to a CVS. And by the way, I didn't know I was supposed to keep that test. I threw it away. And so those were the type of things we were running into. And they were real. These weren't lies. These were people saying, I don't know what to do now. And so we felt we had to make that really clear so that we wouldn't keep running into that. And that's just one example.
So my question actually was, you sound like you're talking about individuals in quarantining. I was talking about actual closures, so that you can verify for me there's nothing in that document that specifically has a pathway for school or grade or class closures.
I won't say that, and let me explain why. Let's look at the EC that got closed just recently. And when you say closure, I don't want to use the word breakout because, believe it or not, Deb and I have no authority to claim DMS or a grade level has a breakout. According to the Department of Maricopa Health, only they can tell us if we have a breakout because they use all those other statistics that you're talking about, Dr. Edwards. We do not. We don't get to deem a breakout. We call them and report, and for those of you who don't know, it is mandatory that we report all people who tested positive, and it's mandatory we report all people who are a close contact. I'm saying that out loud for all the people listening because we had lots of questions this week from parents of, hey, I got an email from the Department of Health. Why do they know that I tested positive? Well, we had to send them the actual document that makes it mandatory for schools and preschools, daycare facilities to report. And so we have to fill out a piece of paper with Scott Edwards' name on it and his email, and that he reported to us he has COVID. He tested positive for COVID on 1/16. We do that. And so I just want to make sure everyone knows we're required to do that. It says mandatory right on the front page of the Department of Maricopa County Community Health. Right. So the next question to answer the rest of that, Scott, has to do with, well, how do we, because the Department of Health didn't tell us to close EC. EC told us to close because when we do contact tracing, we ask the teacher, who is within 6 feet of that student not wearing a mask for more than 15 minutes? And in EC, it's not like second grade where there's 30 kids and they're sitting in certain rows. EC is 3 classes in a playground, mixing and matching and tackling. And I had one person told me, but Frank, they actually are on top of each other, licking each other sometimes. And I said, what? Are you serious? I went out there and witnessed it. These are little kids
Waldorf thing.
And having fun. And that's clearly a close contact. And so when the teachers are asked about, okay, here's 3 kids who have tested positive, who's a close contact to them? Their answer is everyone. Everyone in this room, including the adults who at any time had those kids on their lap to stop them from crying, they are a close contact. And so now we are following the close contact rules, not the breakout rules, Scott. And that's different. We don't rule on a breakout. A Department of Health does. We rule on close contact.
And just, Scott, in case you don't have it in front of me, it does say that in the document. On page 5, it says, if after reporting positive cases and close contacts, MCDPH considers a class to have an outbreak, they may recommend quarantine for a class. In this situation, DMS will work closely with MCDPH and follow their guidance.
And I will tell you what Nellie's reading is correct, but in this case with EC, they did not recommend closing. They didn't recommend that we had a breakout. We closed based on the second piece of how many kids were real close contacts, actual close contacts.
Okay, got it. So I want to look at that decision tree then. So I want to go back to the PowerPoint I gave you guys a month ago, looking at the science, looking at what the CDC was looking at. And if there is any positive, for sure, slam dunk evidence there is with COVID, it is this one part. Everything else we can talk about, but this is the one part where the CDC signs off, says this. There's just no debate about this. 1, the most part, children do not get seriously sick with COVID, any variant, whatever we're dealing with, least of Omicron. 2, child-to-child transmission rarely happens in a school, particularly if they're using some sort of the minimal precautions. And if they're going to get sick, chances are by contact tracing, they got it from somewhere else and brought it to school. 3, opening and closing the schools has absolutely, whether it's in the United States, whether it's in Europe, wherever this is, over the past 2 years, has no effect on the community. Now, community has effect on the school, but it doesn't go the other way around. Whether you open and close schools, it has no effect on the community. So there's no, amplifying effect there. So knowing these 3 things is based in the science. Back in December, when I presented this, the CDC only mentioned the possibility of closing down more than just individuals in the context of considering other major things. That should be done, not by public health officials, but by the school administrators themselves. In January 4th, the CDC absolutely removed all mention of closures anywhere. And I sent an email to the board, please help me. I can't find anything on the CDC website anymore about any closures whatsoever, EC or otherwise, that should be happening. So the CDC, in my mind, can't fathom a reason to have a COVID-related closure of more than just sick people going home, then I'm not sure why we're doing it. Or listening to an epidemiologist giving us a recommendation. And please know, so the board and anybody else listening, an epidemiologist is only concerned about keeping the infection rate as close to 0 as possible. They don't care about the school. They don't care about the well-being. They don't care about anything other than that. That's their job. And so, of course, they're going to recommend, okay, yeah, shut it down. Everybody go home. That's the best way to keep away from the virus, is to go home. So my motion would be to remove any mention of language pertaining to closures from this policy. Now, I know Ben is thinking, I know you, Ben, you're thinking, okay, we still got to have some flexibility here, and we should. But I mean, there's no policies in schools saying if there's a bomb threat, if there's a fire in a closet, if there's someone coming in with a gun shooting, they're going to close the school. You don't need a policy about that. That's going to happen. That's an extreme case. So we can still close for extreme cases, but there shouldn't be a direct pathway for closures, making it easy as it has been, where it's left up to an epidemiologist to decide for us. So I would say this is the science to back this up. This is probably the best science. This is supported by the CDC until they went completely quiet on it. And I would say we should probably do that.
Frank, didn't you say that the MCDPH didn't recommend closing EC and the administration didn't recommend?
No. They did not recommend that we had a breakout that they would say you have to close. That
so
is
epidemiologists didn't tell us to.
Right, they did not. And we have not closed on any order from Maricopa County Health, the Department of Health. I believe before I got there last year, the DMS went totally remote based on a board decision, not on the Department of Health. They never deemed the schools in Arizona in that situation with all those stats that Dr. Edwards is talking about, that they would then say, we have a major breakout.
I apologize, Frank.
That is different than what the CDC puts out for close contacts. If you really want to know why the EC was shut down for 5 days, it was because of close contacts.
Right. And so I apologize, Frank, for insinuating that you were being manipulated or whatever by the epidemiologist. So he said it's a close contact, and it falls back in our court saying that this is we're following our own policy and therefore everybody has to go home. So the decision tree is right there. We have to look at this and say, okay, does this policy work for us? Does this make sense? And it's my feeling, looking back at this, looking what the CDC has written about this, that I made a mistake when I recommended that we should be following the CDC guidelines for quarantining. It doesn't apply to kids in school. Adults at work, sure. Kids at school, the science just doesn't back this up. And so I think we have to make a decision whether we've seen it play out for 2 weeks. Does this make a whole lot of sense based on the things that we did know is true? Kids don't get really sick. Kids to kid transmission doesn't really happen in school. And what's happening in schools doesn't affect the community. If we accept that as real, which apparently it is over the past 2 years, and the CDC has already signed off on it, then I'm not sure we're really doing the best thing in interest for our kids. I want to remind people that there are other pathogens out there. Kids get sick all the time. And to like every time someone coughs to have a panic about this and have Frank run around and do contact tracing and worry about, this, that, and the other thing is probably not the best use of its time. It's impractical for the school. I would recommend to keep it simple for Frank and the administration so they can focus on other things. Base it in science that we know about, not just hyperbole and conjecture. Give parents the control again for their kids' health instead of just doing it for them, and have the goal of actually having a school here, a Waldorf school of all things, not trying to make it a zero infection zone. And I think we should actually let parents keep their sick kids home, keep them home for 24 hours, and if they have a fever, for 48 hours. And let that be a simple thing. And let the healthy kids come back to school. Keep the sick kids out, let the healthy kids come back. And have a school again where this thing is just driving us apart and really infuriating families that are just, it's not a benign thing when you just shut down and send kids home.
Last week we got hit hard. I mean, I kept my kids home because at first they had a runny nose and a cough, and then everyone in their class was sick. So I just kept them home so I wouldn't have to deal with close contact if they were to go back for a day. Did we keep tabs at all on what any of the symptoms were? Are we, and this echoes what Scott says, are we at the point where we're shutting down, where we're excluding, at least on this list, 52 close contacts for runny noses and coughs? And are we following up with the people that had COVID and the people that were close contact? Did the people that were close contact test positive? And again, what are the symptoms? Because my kids had a runny nose and a cough. Nobody had a fever, but they don't even want to go to school because they're afraid now. My kids are afraid now to blow their nose in school or to cough. And we can't do this to our kids over a runny nose and a cough. So are we shutting classes down for runny noses and coughs? And are all of the 52 plus kids that were close contacts, did they turn up COVID positive?
Nellie, to answer your question, there were many kids who ended up testing positive after a close contact, but also remember some of those close contacts were with siblings. So Dr. Edwards is correct in that doesn't mean it happened by sitting next to you in class. It could mean it happened by laying on the couch with you at home. Siblings or parents or grandparents, because a lot of these situations are family members getting sick, or a third grader getting sick who has a 7th grade sister and a 9th grade brother. And now those kids inevitably come down with it 2 days later. So there are a lot of factors involved in this. And then I want to, in order to honor the way Dr. Edwards is saying it, I want to stop using the word shutting down, because we are not shutting down. We do ask someone to quarantine if they have been a close contact, because that's what's been written on that CDC form. That's still there. And so when EC had 3 classes go to quarantine, it was because of close contact. When 8th grade had 3 students last week get sent home for close contact, it was because they were in close contact with a student, well, in that case, 2 different students that tested positive in the room. So it wasn't a closure. It wasn't a breakout. It was a close contact. The symptoms I have been keeping track of as I talk to Deb and Bonnie, because they take the phone calls. There are 4 that are the most common. Fever is at the top. Headache starts with a headache, but somehow, I don't know why. Cough, like you said. And there's one more.
Runny nose?
Nope, it was a different one. headache, fever, cough, sore throat.
Diarrhea.
Sore throat. Sore throat was the other one.
Yeah, Omicron.
Those are the four I would say have been consistent with the kids who eventually tested positive.
My question is, are my kids going to finish their educational career? They're in 6th and 8th grade. So for the next, 4 and 6 years, are we going to, is this it? Like, are we going to be shutting kids inside for 10 days for a 2-day cough and runny nose? I think that we have to take a position and go back to the roots.
What you just said, this board has taken a position and decided to adopt the CDC guideline, which changed from 10 days out to 5 days out, which is a better situation for all of our families and kids.
I agree, Frank, and I voted on that because I know plenty of people that are comfortable wearing masks. We don't wear masks in our house, so I'm comfortable knowing that I have to keep my kids home for 10 days. I just, Frank, I'm very passionate about this. Mm-hmm. And I have, for the duration that my children have been in a Waldorf school, which has been since parent-child, since my boys were 11 months old, I chose this education because it's based on teaching our children to be critical thinkers, free thinkers, to research problems and solutions and make decisions off that. And seeing what has happened to a Waldorf community over the past 2 years has crushed my soul, because the people that I have embraced for years that were okay following the guidelines of having of Rudolf Steiner and being healthy and being okay with our decisions to accept a cold. Over the past 2 years, they have bent their knee and put their head in the ground. And I just wish that as a community, we could come back to the basics of Waldorf, of anthroposophical health and homeopathic health, and just do something different than the narrative that is portrayed across every billboard on our highway and every news station that plays in people's houses. And I'm sorry for going off on a rant. I'm just a little passionate about this. And it just hurts my soul that we're stepping so far away from our Waldorf roots. Because what I see is a school on a beautiful Waldorf campus. It's getting further and further away from being a Waldorf school and Waldorf classrooms and Waldorf philosophy.
Thank you, Nellie. I know it's a hard topic for everyone.
We have people in our community that can provide guidance on healthy options of medication for common colds.
But not everyone believes in homeopathic medicine. Not everyone
I'm
believes
not asking everyone to believe in that. I'm asking for options.
I know, but what we need to do as a board is decide policy, not are we going to follow a community member that's, a homeopath or a naturopath or an MD or anything. I think that's everybody's choice. I love that we have those choices within our community, but we need to focus on policy and making the policy.
Then with this policy, are we not going to acknowledge the students that have prior immunity, that have called the school and said, we have tested positive, and they fall within a 90-day window from today?
But we need proof, because unfortunately, there's a lot of people in the community that aren't being forthcoming or honest. And we need to make sure we're being safeguard for everyone, not just people that believe far one way or far the other way. And that's unfortunately our unhappy task. Is we need to find a middle ground. We need to put language around it that's easy to understand, that leaves room for as many people as possible. There are going to be people that are unhappy and with this. I mean, that's just unfortunately what it is. So how do we write the policy in a way that accepts everyone? That's probably not going to happen. Can we do better than this? Sure. I'm not proposing that we vote on this tonight, but I think we need to stop theorizing and painting with our own passions what we strongly believe. And we need to put it in writing and in motions so that we can actually put a policy into place. Because there's things being like, oh, this isn't a Waldorf school. There are Waldorf schools that don't accept medical exemptions for masks or religious exemptions. The
I
Philadelphia
understand
Waldorf
that.
School.
So then the question is, are we going to continue to shut down classes for the next years to come for runny noses and coughs?
Well, nobody knows what the years to come.
Or if one kid has a runny nose, the 6 kids that sit around them, they also have to go home. Are we going to continue to do that for the next few years?
That's why we need to write a policy so everyone's clear.
Nellie, you guys voted on the CDC policy, which lessens the amount of time a kid misses. It gives the ability for someone with natural immunity to not have to pay a big price and to still come back. And those are good decisions because every one of you have been trying to find a way to meet the goal of keep the doors open and keep the kids in person. Every one of you. If next week the CDC changes their rule to 3 days of quarantine, I would hope this group would vote yes on adopting the new CDC policy. And the goal would be that would keep changing as we learn more about this disease and how to deal with it and how herd immunity spreads until finally it's gone.
Frank?
Yeah, or endemic, right? I think everything kind of points to this becoming endemic at some point soon, relatively, not multiple years of masking at sniffles or masking even necessarily in general. I mean, it's just like cold viruses before. The Spanish flu became our common flu. Like everything over time becomes normalized. It's not right now, and it's close probably with the hospitals hopefully peaking or ramping up, being able to ramp up capacity. But either way, I don't think anyone. The vast majority of people, I don't believe, see this as being sustainable for the long game. Like this isn't a thing that we should. I don't personally fear that my kids are going to be masked for the next 2 years. I think this is going away shortly. I don't know.
Can I comment? I thought we made a healthy middle ground agreement last time. And I know that because I wasn't happy with it. I didn't fully agree with it. And I don't think I voted the first time around. And again, I think we're polarizing that we're going to get what we want and we're not. And I've said this is my thing that I've said to Frank, I've told to everyone, my children, we give the privilege of utopia of this freedom for our children, but we're existing within a governing board that is protected by bylaws, rules, policies, management, and we have to get there. And we have to get there in a middle ground. I'm not willing to take subjective thoughts or feelings, even my own, to policy within this board. So I truly thought that we got into a semi-healthy rhythm. I think we're forgetting to mention the fact that our rates went up in Maricopa last week. It was literally going into a tornado and they went up. So I'm not sure if it was specific towards our policy that really truly gave us the tornado that we had the last 2 weeks, outside of the facts that in Maricopa County, our numbers went up significantly. And do I think the policy was a middle ground? Absolutely. Or at least the amendments that we made.
It's an interesting comment you made. You said you're not getting what you want, or we're not getting what we want. And it shouldn't be a matter of what we want. It should be what the science backs up. And I would like some people to tell me, and Frank, just to go back to everybody keeps saying, okay, we vote this in. We voted this in. It was a reasonable decision. Frank, you stood there and said, I need something to bring back to the parents. And so that was the quickest, easiest thing we could do, is throw a CDC recommendation that's already prefabricated out. And that was predicated I wonder if it made the minutes, but it was predicated on the fact someone said, and maybe it was you or maybe it was someone else, that we would look at this again, see how it goes, and reevaluate. And in my opinion, it was a failure. This contact tracing thing doesn't apply to this school. It shuts down, it closes things needlessly in my mind. Going back to the data, kids don't get seriously sick. Kid-to-kid transmission rarely happens, and what happens in schools doesn't affect the community. So someone please tell me why this policy that we just threw out there quickly to satisfy parents is really the best thing for our school. Someone defend it for me, because I haven't heard a good reason other than the fact that we just won it.
No one's here to answer to anyone. We're doing the best job as we can for policy. If there's changes you want to make to the policy, I propose we have those in writing so we get out of this, kind of, impassioned conversation that we're having, about this. So we've got a blueprint to start, a rough draft to start from. We all have a copy of it. We can make amendments to it. We can vote those in. I feel like that's the cleanest way to go about it. I mean, we can all talk about this. Go ahead, Danielle.
Thank you. I would like to amend that children who aren't exhibiting symptoms aren't sent home, and the close tracing is up to the parent. I mean, yes, provide that notice, but that just isn't providing a lot of consistency and rhythm for the teachers or the students or the families. I don't know how a lot of families are able to cope with such a change, especially for parents who are both working or don't have other accommodations. We're not offering the on-site services. I know we're not required to, but we were doing that when we had the online or the closures, and we're here to serve our community. I would like that to be more, again, consistent and provide more stability for our families and our staff. So I would like to amend that children who aren't exhibiting symptoms are not sent home. And yes, the close tracing is identified to those families.
Those are the things that we need to get onto the policy and then vote in. That's exactly what we need. We need to start somewhere. The policy is what we have, and we can make amendments to it. And then we need to call the motions, and we just need to vote. I mean, I feel like, are we going to change each other's minds on this? I don't know. But I think we've had lots of great discussion, and I'm not trying to be too mechanical or cold about it, but I think we need to move forward, put language around it, and vote. And then we have our policy, and we can move past it, hopefully. And it'll just be a thing of the past, hopefully at some point. But I think that's probably our best go forward with this particular topic, so we don't get entrenched in it meeting after meeting after meeting, and we're still operating on the same policy. And there's better ways to do things. I think we just need to put it in writing on the document, or close, like just the actual rewording. And it shouldn't fall to April to capture everyone's thoughts and ideas. I think if we all take the onus of, I don't like paragraph 2, I want to add in this piece, then that'll make it just really clear. And then we can just vote and make sure that everybody's thoughts are captured in the way that they want them captured. Does that sound reasonable? I just don't know a better way to move forward.
I think you're doing a great job, but I am a little bit concerned about the procedure of how this can be an exchange of ideas. Because if we're just making a motion without actually saying why or the reasoning behind it, I understand it keeps the energy level down, and that's there's a purpose for that. But how are we to make an educated decision about this? I want to hear what other people think. I want to know why Dan thinks that we're not in an endemic right now.
I mean, just because I haven't spent a lot of time researching, and I'm not the CDC or MC, Department of Health and whatnot. So I'm reading that some people think we are, some people think we're not. I think that if the hospitals weren't overflowing, we likely are borderline or are. I think it's gray. I don't think my opinion largely matters, honestly. I think
of course it matters.
Medical community is what I try to listen to. So I don't know.
It's here right now. No one seems to be listening.
Well, I mean, Washington State just a school district just shut down all their schools in their whole district. Metro Arts went back online today. I mean, schools are just, every school is struggling. There's not an easy answer. And I think we just need to find the right answer for us. And the only way I can think to do that is to get our thoughts down so that we can get the policy written. If we just keep defending our thoughts and ideas and, well, this site says this and I'm interpreting the spirit of this that way, I don't think we're going to get anywhere. Not that I don't care about everybody's thoughts and the way people are ingesting information or the way they're reading things, but at some point in time, we really need to just put it in black and white and vote. And if we need to have another discussion, like another meeting where we're just discussing our feelings, and I've read this research, and I think, we need to take the Waldorf, approach here and teachers that. I mean, that's fine too. I'm not suggesting we need to do that like this moment, but I feel like the longer we're in flux and unclear about it, the more the community is going to be in flux and unclear about it. And so for me, I think we need to try to get some clarity on what our BMS policy is on COVID. Yes, Frank, go ahead.
Okay, and I did this last time, and I know it's controversial, but tomorrow I'm going to school, and I'd love to know, what am I following? Am I following what you voted on 2 weeks ago? Am I following the document I sent to you today that all it did was give an explanation of those rules?
I don't think we're there yet, Frank.
What was voted in is what you need to go on.
But I'm struggling to figure out a lot right now. I feel like if you have a policy, you can build guidelines. That's why policies are usually very broad, very black and white, but it is then designated usually per the executive director or the principal to build a guideline plan that is adapted from the policies. And it seems like that's what Frank has done. So I feel like, what are we telling Frank not to do? Because that, I feel like, is his right of, they have to interpret and figure out the policy and then write guidance to support that policy.
So are we allowed then to talk about this and propose changes or ideas that we think we should look into?
The policy hasn't been, this 2022 COVID policy hasn't been put into any kind of effect. Again, just a rough draft, starting point from the mitigation team based on guideline. I mean, what we voted on is what we voted on last meeting. That's our current policy. But we need to get an actual document that we can put on our website, that we can direct people to. Just those couple of motions we were a little bit disjointed in the day-to-day activities of, what do we do if this? What do we do if that? Just kind of some of the specifics.
What we've done in the past is we voted on the policy. Like we voted, we were going to follow Maricopa County. We're going to follow CDC, and then it was up to the executives to come up with the guidelines, like Mariah was saying. We didn't vote on the guidelines. If we wanted to change how the guidelines were interpreted, we were supposed to go back and, in theory, we're supposed to go back and amend the policy to guide the guidelines, basically. And I think that's what we should be. That's my opinion. I think it's my opinion. I don't know if it's like what boards do. Like, we should be looking to make amendments to the policy so that Frank can have better guidance to craft the guidelines for the school. Like, the policy has been set. We already voted on that. Like, we're not voting again on the guidelines. I don't think, or we're telling Frank what to write and what not to write at that really detailed level, where we're going to flip flop back and forth endlessly and nothing will ever get passed. And in that light, shouldn't have even been doing 5-day isolation. We should have stuck to 10 because the policy hadn't been translated into a guideline that we could vote on. So, but that's not what happened. We passed the 5-day policy, and that was put into effect while Frank answered a bunch of questions and created more detailed answers and information that will help guide the parents to understand what's happening.
Right. We passed a 1-page sheet, and then what was presented to the, we passed a 1-day sheet that said we are allowing natural immunity. And then what was presented to the families was more than 1 page and listed all of these guidelines in pretty much canceling out any past natural immunity that people might have had. I didn't agree to that. And I know that there's no way to check, like that, and I had a conversation with Frank. He said, how do I check natural immunity? I said, well, we can start at least from here back, families that have called in and said, my child's out sick with COVID. And then I saw the policies that went out, and it had all of these guidelines in regards to testing and showing numbers and having it be verified. And I can understand that could be something we're looking for moving forward, but that doesn't help the families that over the past 90 days have had COVID and reported it to the school.
To me, this feels like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Like you went from 10 days to 5 days and you got natural immunity. You just don't like how the natural immunity piece was completely incorporated. So I would say that we should go back, and if we want to do that, we should go back and amend the policy to say, and this is how we'll determine natural immunity, amending further what the CDC, because we amended the CDC's guidelines to add in natural immunity in the first place.
Right, but Frank and Deb added additional information in regards to the testing that we didn't even talk about.
They didn't do policy. They built a guideline and a plan. They did not do policy work.
I understand that, but they're not allowing families that have had COVID and reported it to the school over the past 90 days. They're not allowing that verified natural immunity to the only degree because they took a test and then said, yes, we're homesick with COVID and threw the test out.
I mean, they're doing what's the equivalent of asking for a doctor's note if someone calls in sick.
And by the way, Nellie, we accepted some people's doctor's notes because they threw the test out. We didn't keep anybody out. I wouldn't do that. I found a way to get confirmation. But I do think the devil's in the details. And Nellie is right that wasn't voted on at the last meeting.
That wasn't even talked about.
I understand, but yet it came up. And so we have to resolve it. And that's why the last 2 weeks have been very complex for families not understanding what is it you want? What is the policy? So I'm all for putting it in writing so it's crystal clear. I think that's really important. Otherwise, they think we're just making stuff up.
And my impression also last week was we presented a quick document for Frank to bring back and get us through the next 2 weeks. And then we were going to continue to work on this COVID policy at this meeting. Am I the only one did I understand that wrong? Am I the only one that understood that incorrectly?
No, I understood that, Nellie. And part of that was because I said, you guys, I have to have something to enforce tomorrow. Are we doing the CDC guideline or not? I'm the one who said that. That's my fault. But again, I felt like we either have a policy or we don't. But you are correct that you passed that quickly so we had something to work with and that we would continue talking about this because there was still a lot left unsaid. That's what I believe to be true.
We spent the last 30 minutes talking about it. So again, I think the best move forward is to go off of this. I mean, this isn't official. This, the 2022 COVID policy and procedure that we sent around today. If there are things that you feel like need to be tweaked or amended or worded differently, I think get all that information to us. And if it's just a wordsmithing thing for clarity's sake, great. If it's something where I strongly feel like we need to take this out or we need to add this in, then put that together too, put it in a motion. Let's send it out to everyone so that we know, and then we'll come prepared to vote on it. And then we can make those changes to the policy. Does that sound reasonable to everyone?
I just struggle with that because now we wait another 14 days and they have to do something.
Okay.
And again, as I continue to listen, I want to stand firmer into they have a policy, let them write the procedure and guideline. That is not our position to manage that portion of it. If we want to change the policy, then why don't we make changes right now and vote on it? But then they have to figure out their action plan. And that's not governance, that's management. But I do think sitting around for 14 days is going to be not fun for anyone, no matter what size.
I agree, Maria. I mean,
Can we just hold the dike a little bit and just let the EC? I'm worried that EC is never going to go back to school for the next 2 weeks with the way we have things right now.
No.
You don't think so?
Why do you say that?
I just 2 more kids get sick and they shut down because of contact tracing. The whole thing. So, I mean, that's what I'm worried about. Do you not see that happening, Frank?
Scott, you are absolutely right. That is a possibility. And I have met with the EC team to discuss what we should do. And they felt strongly that part of the Waldorf education was that they are all in one cohort and play together. And that why are we panicking over one situation? It only happened once. If it happens again, we may change some rules in there, but they wanted to keep the sanctity of the Waldorf concepts of letting the kids be in one cohort and playing together. And they didn't want to change that. And I support that. Maybe we are panicking and that was one situation. They had a voice of reason for me. They discussed it very openly and positively with me. They're a good team. They believe strongly in Waldorf. That department, all 3 teachers are Waldorf trained, certified Waldorf teachers. And so I'm listening to my Waldorf teachers right now to not push a panic button and let's see.
so then that's something that I would like to talk about then on this document, page 2, all the way at the bottom. If you're exposed to someone with COVID-19, I'm sure that that would fall then under close contact. I would like to say that if they are close contacts, we notify the families, they monitor symptoms, but they're allowed to stay in school.
That was the amendment I proposed as well. And I know I sent you wording on that, Frank, in person. And there's 2 situations, one that included unknown and one that included known.
Is that a motion?
Yes.
Is that applying
What's
to
the motion?
To amend the policies that children who are not exhibiting symptoms, even after close contact, are allowed to return to school or kept in school. The families can be notified and to closely monitor.
K through 12?
The entire school. Yes, K through 12. I think preschool.
Early childhood through 12.
Private. Yeah, thank you.
Does that need a second?
Can I ask a question just to clarify? How does that, if we do that amendment, how does it fit with the rest of it? Does it have conflicting messages, or how does it play out? I'm not sure.
It doesn't follow the CDC guidelines.
That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking if you amend that part of it for the contact tracing, what about the rest of it? Can we still execute the rest of the part of it? I'm just asking how it plays out logistically.
If that were approved, what next? What would be the steps when that happens?
I'm trying to take a kid through that right now. So if I test positive, I'm still going to be quarantined. But if you're asymptomatic, then even if you're a close contact, you stay in school, but if you're symptomatic, you leave and follow the same quarantine?
If you're positive, you stay home. If you're positive, Scott, and I sat next to you, I would be notified that you were positive and I would monitor my symptoms, but stay in school if I had any symptoms.
Second.
Other discussion, Mr. Tanner?
Danielle, are you including the faculty and staff in this motion as well? Or
Yes.
is this just pertaining to children?
I would include the.
Yes, it
across-
pertains to employees. Okay.
Yes, including faculty and staff. Again, that's their preference. If they feel that they should be home, absolutely, that's their choice. If they want to be tested first, or if they prefer to quarantine, that should still be up to the individual.
Thank you for the clarification.
Oh,
Can I-
I'm muted. I need to make sure that I've got this right. There's just before we vote. Let me read it to myself first, make sure it's not gibberish. Okay. Danielle, tell me if this works for you. Danielle Martinez moved to amend the policy that children and staff who are not exhibiting symptoms, who are close contacts, will not need to quarantine. They will be closely monitored for symptoms and will be able to stay in school.
And the families notified that they were close contacts.
In the prior motions we outlined in the CDC, we're like, in this section, this was added. Can we outline how that would override or add to the existing CDC recommendations, including our amendment with the COVID positive in the last 90 days? Because it's really hard to trace through the decision tree effectively of how this plays out without that context setting. It's almost like I'm trying to do it in my head, where I play the CDC single pager, add in last week, and then add in this. Does anyone have it? Let's see if I can find it.
So Dan, I am thinking back to the email we got from Frank from the Attorney General, and in there it said that at this point, schools should really go off their own guidance and make their own policies. And I would say for something like this, we can amend this to have it be an amendment that we're making for our school. It doesn't necessarily have to be that this is Maricopa County, this is CDC, and we don't need to hold them as the reigning staff of.
I agree. I mean, I'm more trying to see, like, we already agreed on one thing. Does this cancel? Like, I'm pretty much assuming that no one's saying this should cancel out everything else we passed. So
if you're looking at the document, right? So that's just one section on here. If you are exposed to someone with COVID-19, then it says exceptions for needing to quarantine, and in there is natural immunity and if you've been vaccinated. And then it goes into if a student or staff member tests positive. I think that those guidelines are pretty clear. Stay home for 5 days, wear a mask, if your symptoms are resolving but still have a fever, continue to stay home until you're fever free.
I was going back to the policy that we created last 2 weeks ago I thought we were amending that policy so that would affect the guidelines that Frank comes up with?
I think right now Nellie is specifically looking at the policy that Kristen sent us, and she's revising that. So maybe that's the simplest thing. Nellie or Danielle, if you have the document in front of you, if you can say like this page, this line will be replaced with, because then that will be very specific, and we could go back to Deb and Frank and say, we want this line replaced with this. It's all right there in the motion.
So it's
this is just a draft policy. I just want to make sure we know that too.
Yes.
This is just a draft.
It's page 2.
We would still have to approve it once we're all done, but this would be very specific. And then we have something concrete that we can send them that's not, well, we like this idea, we want that. And they're like, well, where is it in the doc? I just am trying to make it as simple as possible, because I'm having a hard time even looking at Danielle's motion going, wait, what does that mean? Where is that in the document?
So that
what
falls
am I voting on?
on the document that Kirsten sent us. That falls under page 2.
Wait, are you making a motion right now?
No, this is just to give you clarifying where this fits into this document. Danielle's motion fits into the document.
Wait, hold on 1 second, because I printed it and you're saying page numbers, so I'm going to write them real big so I know what you're talking about and I can follow along easily. I can't have tabs open and type, so I'm the old lady with the paper printed out.
I have to have it printed out as well, so I understand.
I'm listening. Let me type, and then hopefully that will turn into something more official, so we are just very clear about what we're asking them to do. You're muted. I can't hear you.
Sorry. On page 2 at the bottom, under the section, if you were exposed to someone with COVID-19, it says quarantine. I think that we should remove the word quarantine, because we're saying now that's, if you were exposed to someone with COVID-19, you're a close contact. And then this is where Danielle's motion comes into play. You will be notified by the school that you're a close contact. And please continue to monitor your symptoms, if you have any symptoms. If you get COVID symptoms, stay home. But if you don't, carry on your happy life of licking faces and playing in the dirt.
I'm still confused as to what just happened to the old policy.
Nothing. So the CDC guidelines, as I understand it, are still, what we voted on last time is still in effect. It's the draft policy that we're making changes to. Is that correct? The draft policy that I sent today.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
Oh, I thought we were making modifications to give Frank. So, okay, we can table this.
Well, I'm just trying to be clear, because I feel like we're all over the place and we're not getting
Isn't
anywhere.
the purpose of this, though, to go over this draft policy so we can finalize it, and then Frank has the document? Frank has been asking from the beginning that he wants direction from us. I understand that he is then coming back and dealing with the school population, but he has said for months that he's working off direction from the board on this.
Nellie is correct. I gave you guys a document today, and I believe that amendment is to change the close contact CDC ruling. That's what that amendment says, is we are not going to quarantine close contacts. Close contacts will be reported to the family, and it's up to the family to decide to keep their child home if they are displaying symptoms. That's what I thought I heard in the amendment.
It's not if. Displaying symptoms is a definite home.
Isn't there already a policy where they have a fever, they stay home? I mean, they're sent home. I mean, isn't that kind of a standard thing that schools have?
Scott, that is normal in all schools, even before COVID.
Right.
That any fever over 99.9, you're supposed to keep your child home until the fever subsides without medication. That's minimum 24 hours. Scott, for 1,000 years, parents violate that. You just need to know that.
So this has nothing to do with CDC quarantine guidelines we voted on. It doesn't really have anything to do with Frank's guidelines, except for that we would want to pass a new policy regarding close contact that then he could use to create his guidelines. So that way we're not taking managerial control away from Frank to create school guidelines.
Correct.
Is that more?
Yes.
Overhead? Okay.
Yeah.
Does this go back to the idea that Scott proposed 2 weeks ago that maybe he sit on with Frank and Deb to help them word this policy, or they have somebody to fall back on in the medical field?
I don't know if it does.
I have to say this, Dan, you just confused the heck out of me. You have a document that has 3 titles. One is people who test positive. The next title is people who have immunity and have had, because they've had COVID in the last 90 days. And the third title is people who have been exposed and are close contacts. Danielle's proposal is that we do not follow that third line having to do with close contacts, that we write our own line for DMS. So we would be following 2 of the CDC guidelines and not the close contact rule. That's how I interpret all this conversation. Please, someone correct me if I am wrong in interpreting it that way.
That's accurate.
Okay. So that's what you would be voting on.
I think that, Danielle, you picked out the right issue in the policy. That's really, I mean, it appears to me that that's the sticking point, right? That's the reason that EC is closed. That's the reason that so many kids are not in person. The close contact thing. And I know that close contact reporting requirements, vary pretty widely across the county. I'm certainly willing to sort of consider this. I personally would like more time to sort of look into this because I think this conversation has been very clarifying for me, and that I can sort of see the issue with the policy now after this conversation. I personally have a difficult time, voting with any confidence on it right now. Certainly open to it. I think that there's just having like language for that section that better integrates into what is in the document already would help. One issue that I'm seeing right now is that I think if we did pass the amendment as worded, that the mask policy would still be in place, which means, and there's still no medical exemptions for that, which means that they could go back, but they would be forced to wear masks and they'd have to quarantine anyway if they didn't have masks. And so like, there's a lot of like different details there in that one section about the close contact that I think that I would love just some more time to sort of think about like the right way to write that. Because it does seem like the sticking point from what I can tell from this conversation. And it does seem to be the real reason why so many students are not in class. So personally, I would love just some more time to sort of like think about that section of the COVID policy beyond this meeting.
I agree. I think this is actually really close to what I wanted last board meeting. But I'm like struggling to put things together without putting it down on paper and kind of see how it's going to play into the other bits. But I'm pretty sure this is really close to what I was trying to do, where I was trying to keep kids from being sent home just for being close contacts, as everyone was being safe and masking and being safe, in some people's perspectives, but masking and whatnot, or vaccinated or any of those other things. So I would also like more time, even though I know that means either an emergency meeting or 2 weeks.
If I could
I was
also
actually looking into emergency meetings, and We could have another meeting without it being emergency as long as we post our agenda and announce it 24 hours before the next meeting. So because this doesn't really qualify as well, I guess it could be spun as an emergency. But so that might be an option, just to have another COVID specific board meeting. If we can schedule it 24 hours in advance, we can give the public notice so that people can attend and we're still compliant with Arizona open meeting laws, just as an option.
Just so I can understand, did we have a motion or not on the floor already? Like, do we have to do anything as far as what Danielle had put out?
There was a motion, but there was no, oh wait, no, there was a second.
There was a second.
And then it just went into discussion.
Yes, I second it. Maybe we should discuss this because I do fear that the length and like everything we talked about, Frank's getting a lot of heat. And if this is something that can calm the waters, if we all can agree, I would like to know. I think it's healthy to talk about this. One thing I do want to say, though, if I could just offer a medical fact out there while you're looking into it and researching and getting more comfortable with things. It is a very, very common misconception about the issue, and you know this because it's been politicized quite a bit, the issue of asymptomatic carriers, if you will, who are contagious. And things are a spectrum. And with every virus, there's always going to be a period where you are contagious in the early portions of it. And this timeline has changed, over the last 2 years as we start to understand this. The misconception is that, oh my gosh, you can carry it and give it. It's actually still extremely uncommon to be asymptomatic and contagious. Less so for children. So that is still the fact. They still have to say, yes, you theoretically could pass it on, but it's not blown up quite like it is as it's presented. So I just want to make people aware of that as well. When we talk about symptoms, I don't think we're being terribly cavalier with it.
Just in terms of things that need to happen at this meeting, I took Mariah's suggestion earlier that, since we voted on the policy last time, that the guidelines that we were sent can still be in effect until we take some action on them. So from what I understood there, we don't necessarily need to vote on that draft tonight. Tell me if I'm wrong about that. But then the second issue is if we're going to have a specific meeting before the next scheduled one, Kirsten, do we need to decide that now, or do we need to? Is that something decided over the email list?
But we shouldn't be having reply all emails, just in compliance with Arizona open meeting laws. So I think it's better that we discuss it here and decide. Anybody have thoughts on?
Well,
yep, Mr. Tanner.
I mean, at this point, we have a motion on the floor, and it either needs to be retracted or voted on at this point. It's time to move along.
Okay. Do we need to reread the motion, or is everybody clear and ready to vote?
I'm happy to reread it. I would like to reread it for myself.
Yeah.
And see if I can even find it. It's 3 pages ago. Okay. Danielle Martinez moved to amend the policy that children, staff who are not exhibiting symptoms who are close contacts will not need to quarantine. They will be closely monitored for symptoms and will be able to stay in school. The families will be notified that they are close contacts. Danielle, do you approve of that? Okay, so Scott Edwards seconded. And Kirsten, if you want to lead us in the vote.
All those in favor? Okay, 3 in favor, all opposed? Right, motion does not pass. Any abstaining? I don't think I saw anyone that didn't vote one way or the other. Okay.
Can we have a meeting soon, other than 2 weeks, where we further discuss this?
I'm fine with the meeting. I'm just nervous. I'm nervous that this is a meeting. We are, and I get, Ben, your comment of we need to figure things out and assess and read, but this is in real time action that tomorrow morning things will continue. And I feel like we're trending towards, and I am fully responsible for digging my point across and making points and not driving action items, but I'm really afraid that we're going to do this again in a couple days or in a week with the understanding that we just need more time. I'm not sure how much time we need and what we're really trying to accomplish.
That's pretty clear. The three of us that are making kind of comments and are getting shot down, and I'm not sure if we're going to be going anywhere with this. Are we? What is going to be changing? So it sounds like there seems to be various party lines on this. Some people, we've been talking a lot, and I agree with Mariah. I'm not sure where we're going at this point. What exactly is going to be amended from anybody else? I know I'm going to put a lot of amendments there, but it sounds like there's nothing that's budging.
That's why we vote. I mean, it's not fair for you to decide how I'm going to vote or how anyone else is going to vote based off this vote. I mean, we just haven't been given enough time. So I think
we're going to revisit it, is what you're saying.
I'm saying that if we have it in writing beforehand, rather than these large conversations where it's easy to kind of get lost in the details of what are we even talking about anymore. If we have it in writing, we have motions, we have time to review, research, see how that feels best within our community from research we're doing from CDC or not at all. And then we just bring it to vote. Like maybe the next meeting is there doesn't need to be a lot of discussion. It's just here's the motion, here's the vote, here's the motion, here's the vote, so that we can make forward progress rather than kind of getting stuck in the wheel of discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a really good chance I agree with the motion. I just want to put it alongside the rest of the document and read it thoroughly and comprehend it and make sure that there's not weirdly conflicting details that we've given Frank before in the past. Like, feels like almost every time we pass COVID policy, honestly. And I would like to do less of that. And that's the only reason why I voted no, was because I want to be sure what I'm voting for and how it affects.
I get that, but that's one amendment. We're talking about a possibility of multiple different additions taken away. I mean, we're spending days to pause off of one amendment. And I think we have strong strides on both sides that might be making multiple amendments. We're going to be here until the end of time if we're going to take respite and time to really make and assure that this is exactly what our needs are. And with the understanding that I'm hopeful that we are all putting forth really sound ideas when we come up with a vote, and that we have to utilize this time and space to vote and make action instead of just going around and around. But that was just one recommendation of a change. And I think I've heard from Scott, like there might be multiple, there might be 10.
April,
I have an idea.
Yes,
that
please.
might solve sort of two problems in one. If we made a motion to approve the document as is until our next meeting of February the 2nd. And at that meeting, we can we'll have 2 weeks Frank will have something to use for the next 2 weeks. And during that time, we can study the document. We can send the agendized I forgot what you call it, agendized motions to you. They can get on the agenda, and then we have time to do all of that. But Frank and Deb aren't spinning their wheels going, what does the board want us to do? They have it. They've already written it. If we just approve it for the next 2 weeks until our next meeting, that gives us some time and helps them to have something to follow for now.
April, I had a question. Is it easier to send you documents to add to the drive, or is it okay to just add things to the drive? Is there a
you can pop them in there. That's fine.
Okay.
But if we're talking about agendized motions, those should go to Kirsten because those are going to go on the agenda.
I was asking on something else, so thank you.
So first, real quick, just to echo Dan, I voted no on that amendment for the same reason. I just want to get the language right and work it into the overall document. And in that vein, I know this is an urgent issue for a lot of people, but there are also people on both sides of the issue as well. And I think it makes sense to take time with it rather than be rushing things. And so I don't think we need an emergency meeting. I think we can wait 2 weeks until the next regularly scheduled meeting to bring up amendments to the COVID policy. And in the meantime, I will second April's motion. I don't know if it was a motion to approve the existing document draft that was sent until the next board meeting.
Let me write out my motion and then I'll read it because I'm not going to be able to say it and remember what I said. So give me just a minute to try to put that in writing.
If you don't mind, Frank, I would love to get your thoughts on, do you feel like an interim 2-week policy is helpful, or do you think it will, or is it not helpful?
Well, it's certainly better than this ending and us just following the first document that you passed 2 weeks ago, because there's still confusion around that document. So for the sake of, you still have lots of thoughts about where we're going. And at least 2 people said they're considering this motion. They just want more time. That's a positive thing. I like April's idea of this is a temporary. Remember, the document I gave you is just an explanation of what you passed 2 weeks ago. That's all it is. Because it was confusing because it was so short. It was ambiguous. So that's all that is. We didn't add anything. We just explained it. I can live with 2 weeks until you guys come back and discuss more and possibly make amendments to it. At least I will have a written document, like several of you have said, that I can go back and follow right now that is much more clear than what was passed 2 weeks ago. So I'm okay with that. I can do that. Did everybody freeze?
No, I think we're just giving April that extra minute to
You guys are talking while I'm trying to write. My type A personality is trying to listen and
April.
write at the same time.
Frank was frozen on my screen.
I'm a high needs student. All conditions have to be perfect, and they're just not. Okay. I move to approve the 2022 COVID-19 policies and procedures document until the next meeting on February 2nd, 2022. During the next 2 weeks, the board will study the policy and send Kirsten Kupina their agendized motions for the next agenda. Can I get a second for that?
Second.
Dan?
Okay. All those in favor? Like 3, 4, 5, 6 in favor. Okay. Did you get all those, April?
Yes.
Okay. All opposed? And 3 opposed. Motion passes. So we'll adopt this policy for the next 2 weeks. Just to reiterate, any motions or changes that you want to make, let me know. I'll put them on the agenda. I usually have a draft agenda going, so just send it to me at any point in time. I'll just start putting them on there, and then we can make any revisions that we feel like we need to in our regularly scheduled board meeting on February 2nd.
Can we please ask people to try and make the motions or as granular as possible, as long, like if two require each other, like yes, put them in the same motion, but like try not to like put 5 things in one, because then it makes it so if you agree with 2 of them but not 3, then you're in a situation where you either have to go, I don't know, it just makes it difficult. We can't pick and choose.
Yeah, that's
if possible.
okay. Yeah, I think that's really good. Good things to think about.
Mariah, tell me more about the change in the policy versus the other details of it. I mean, how above this do we stay with our amendments? Because the document's pretty detailed.
So, and this is my perception. I think we're way far in the weeds, and I think we need to work. I think we need to work off of policy and let management build guidelines.
Okay.
But that's just my personal philosophy.
Go motherhood.
Hang in there, Mariah. You got this.
We're all there with you. Okay, Mr. Tanner.
I motion to adjourn.
I second that motion. All those in favor?
I just have one more question, not COVID related, I promise.
Wait, I'm sorry. Can we check this vote first? That's everybody. Okay. Thank you. Sorry, Nellie. I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to make sure I
That's okay.
got that.
I don't want to confuse you. Well, I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm good. Go for it.
Kirsten, in some of your emails responses to parents, you quote the parent code of conduct, and I had to dig really far to find it. And it was like buried in a town hall meeting from 2019. Can we make that accessible?
On our website. Yeah, it's on our website.
Where?
I can provide you the link. I'll send that out after the meeting.
Okay.
It's in the parent handbook. If you go to the community page, there's a page that has all parent council information, and there's blocks at the bottom. There's like 6 or 9 blocks, and one of them is the parent handbook. It's in the parent handbook.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I don't think we finished that motion. Was there anyone opposed to closing the meeting? No, none abstaining. Okay, great. So, Mr. Franks, if you would please read us the closing verse.
The most important tasks for humankind today and in the future is that we should learn to live together and understand one another. If this human fellowship is not achieved, all talk of development is empty. Rudolf Steiner.
Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Everyone, take care.
Good night.